Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating 700-year-old mystery. We're looking at how Switzerland totally defied brutal geography, warring empires, and severely limited resources to become an absolute global wealth titan. So, if you've ever found yourself wondering how a tiny landlocked, mountainous nation managed to transform into a $3 trillion economic fortress, well, you are definitely in the right place.
Let's kick things off with a pretty massive paradox, because it really defines the whole Swiss story. Geographically speaking, Switzerland is the ultimate underdog. I mean, it's totally landlocked, it has zero natural resources to speak of, disjointed borders, and it doesn't even have a single unifying language. And yet, the reality is entirely different. Today, it's essentially the richest island in Europe, a pristine economic safe haven. So how exactly do you get from point A to point B?
Here's how we're going to solve this together. First, we'll look at the geographic underdog. 2, the shift from mercenaries to neutrality. 3, the direct democracy engine. 4, building that banking powerhouse. And finally, the modern Swiss lifeboat.
All right, Chapter 1, the Geographic Underdog Paradox.
So this all actually kicks off way back in 1291. 3 men met up peacefully in a meadow to form an alliance. It was basically a promise to just have each other's backs through good times and bad. But this quiet little meadow agreement, it quickly escalated into a total David versus Goliath scenario. Fast forward to 1315 at the Battle of Morgarten. A ragtag militia of Swiss herdsmen and farmers successfully ambushed a massive, heavily equipped Austrian army. They cleverly used the tight geography between 2 lakes to their absolute advantage and scored this resounding victory that completely kickstarted the expansion of the Swiss Confederation.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, Mercenaries to Masterful Neutrality. By the 1500s, the Swiss were rapidly expanding their territory, and they were building this reputation as, well, nearly undefeatable fighters. But then a massive turning point hit. In 1515, they suffered a crushing defeat to the French at Malignano. Now, normally you'd expect a rising power to plot their revenge, right? But instead, they did something totally shocking. They just stopped fighting. They gave up the territory and made peace. And it was this specific, pivotal moment that sparked their permanent neutrality, a stance that was later officially locked in and recognized by European powers at the 1815 Congress of Vienna.
But what happens next is just brilliant. The Swiss were totally done fighting as a country, sure, but everyone still knew they were some of the most relentless fighters in Europe. So, they found a loophole. Instead of fighting their own wars, they took that battle-tested reputation and turned it into cold, hard cash. Manpower literally became their ultimate export. They started renting out entire, cohesive battalions of mercenaries to opposing European powers. They figured out a way to monetize their military prowess without ever risking their own borders.
Which brings us to Chapter 3, the direct democracy engine.
Now, before Switzerland truly unified in 1848, their internal market was pure chaos. Try to wrap your head around this. There were a staggering 860 different types of coins circulating in Switzerland at the time, over 800. It wasn't until they finally abolished internal tariffs and rolled out a single currency, the Swiss franc, that the nation actually tied together economically.
But this economic unification was beautifully paired with a political one through direct democracy. Imagine actually voting directly on exactly where your tax dollars go, rather than just electing some official to do it for you. This system keeps Swiss taxes incredibly low because the public literally has to approve the government's spending. Now, yes, it definitely makes policy changes move at a glacial pace. I mean, women didn't even get the right to vote there until 1971. But in an era where global politics are constantly whipping back and forth, this slow, super deliberate process creates incredibly deep political stability. And if there's one thing money loves, it's stability.
Okay, Chapter 4, building a banking powerhouse.
You know, Swiss bank secrecy actually dates back centuries, but it truly hit overdrive during World War I. While all the other European powers were hiking up taxes to fund the war effort, Swiss bankers were actively traveling to places like France to advertise a brand new innovation, numbered bank accounts. Basically, your name was entirely replaced by a multi-digit number, known only to you and the bank. It was perfectly engineered to shelter wealthy Europeans' money from sudden, aggressive wartime taxation. And honestly, that's a fear that still drives people toward financial safe havens today.
Then, when World War II broke out, this whole neutrality concept became incredibly complex. Militarily, Switzerland stayed neutral, but economically, they ended up serving both sides. On one hand, they maintained accounts for Axis powers, stored stolen German gold, and lent money to Germany and Italy. But on the exact same token, Swiss banks maintained accounts for hundreds of German Jewish families, and they actively hid Jewish assets deep in underground military bunkers in the Alps, protecting them from a potential German invasion.
To totally lock down this fortress mentality and ensure foreign governments couldn't pry into client assets, Switzerland passed a massive landmark law. In 1934, violating banking secrecy was officially made a federal offense. You could literally go to prison just for revealing client info. And that move, it cemented ultimate, unbreakable trust for wealthy elites worldwide.
And that leads us to our final chapter. Chapter 5, the modern Swiss lifeboat.
All of this centuries-long history translates into some absolutely mind-blowing numbers today. We're talking about $2.4 trillion in foreign assets managed by Swiss banks. That's more than any other country on Earth. In fact, the total banking assets in Switzerland sit at over $3 trillion, which is literally larger than the entire Swiss GDP. For anyone out there worried about global financial volatility, Switzerland is still the ultimate panic room.
So why are billionaires still flocking there? Well, while British and American banks have heavily shifted toward maximizing profit and taking risks, which, as we've seen recently, can sometimes trigger massive bank runs, Swiss banks guarantee one core thing above all else: absolute stability. The trust runs so deep that billionaires choose Swiss banks even when they are actively charged negative interest rates. Think about that for a second. They are literally paying the bank just for the privilege of storing their money safely in Switzerland.
But hey, it's not all just bank vaults and secret numbered accounts. The Swiss economic engine is surprisingly diverse. Beyond the banking sector, they've built a hyper-resilient economy focused on high-quality, specialized manufacturing. We're talking world-renowned Swiss watches, high-end optics, and massive pharmaceutical companies. They completely dominate in high-end food, think world-class cheese and chocolate, and they support this whole ecosystem with an insanely punctual train network that drives both domestic commerce and a huge tourism industry.
And this intense culture of precision and innovation, it totally bleeds into everyday life. Switzerland has actually brought us a ton of everyday staples that you probably use all the time without realizing their Swiss origins. Aluminum foil? Swiss. Velcro? Swiss. The electric toothbrush? Yep, also Swiss. They just took that exact same meticulous engineering they used to conquer the banking world, and they applied it right to consumer goods.
So it leaves us with this really fascinating question to chew on. In a world of constant geopolitical conflict and constantly shifting empires, is neutrality actually the ultimate currency? It's just incredible to consider how staying out of the fight, leveraging their unique geography, and steadfastly protecting their political stability allowed a landlocked, resource-poor nation to build a $3 trillion empire and basically become the ultimate lifeboat for the world's wealth.
Well, that brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed learning how Switzerland built this unbelievable economic engine, and you want to keep unraveling the fascinating stories behind the world's biggest systems with us, please like and subscribe for more explainers. Catch you in the next one.